Hey guys, tonight we explore the gentle, minty fresh saga of ancient dental care. Yes, it turns out your ancestors were scrubbing, scraping, and swishing long before fluoride and TikTok hacks arrived. You're going to find yourself in the dusty streets of ancient Egypt, the echoing bathhouses of Rome, and even the herbal kitchens of the Han Dynasty, all while trying to keep your imaginary molars intact. Just a heads up, you probably won't survive this nightly routine without a little bleeding, some ash in your mouth, or, occasionally, crocodile dung. Yes, really. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And if you're listening from somewhere far away, drop your location and your local time in the comments. It's always fun to see who's staying up late with us. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You trudge along a Nile riverbank as the sun dips low. In one hand, you carry a small twig. Not just any stick, this is a miswak, harvested from the Salvadora persica tree. It's the toothbrush of choice for much of the ancient world, from Egypt to the Middle East, and tonight, it's your dental defense. You sit on a worn stone step near a mud brick house and chew the end of the twig until it splays into soft fibers. Then you begin brushing. It tastes earthy, a little spicy, like pepper with a hint of mint. It's oddly refreshing, and certainly more flavorful than the sand and ashes concoction your neighbor prefers. The ancient Egyptians took dental hygiene seriously, perhaps because their bread, full of stone ground flour, often carried bits of grit. This wore down teeth fast. In fact, mummies have been found with jawbones worn nearly flat. You can almost feel your molars ache just thinking about it. To fight decay, they used paste made from crushed pumice stone and burned eggshells. Some recipes even included ox hooves and mirror. Effective, maybe, pleasant. Not unless you enjoy brushing with spicy gravel. You rinse with cool water carried in a clay pot, but across the world, someone else is gargling differently. Flash forward centuries and miles to ancient Rome, where your counterpart, perhaps a merchant or minor senator, is swishing his mouth with human urine. Yes, you heard that right. Ammonia in urine was believed to whiten teeth, and while historians still argue whether it truly worked, Romans were convinced enough to import Portuguese urine for the job. That's right, someone's job was to export that. The flavor, let's not dwell. Instead, we shift to the Far East. You now kneel on a tatami mat in Han Dynasty China, gently crushing fragrant herbs between stones. Mint, ginseng, and a sprinkle of salt, this blend, mixed into a powder, is dabbed onto a silk cloth and rubbed along your gums. It smells soothing, like a sleepy forest in spring. Here, oral care isn't just about breath, it's tied to medicine, to harmony between organs. A clean mouth means a peaceful spirit. You feel that calmness wash over you as you finish. Somewhere else, in an ancient Greek villa, a philosopher carefully cleans his teeth with a paste made from coral powder and crushed bones. The texture,
gritty, the sensation, rough.
But it's a matter of hygiene and virtue. Cleanliness is next to wisdom, after all. Historians still argue whether the Greeks' approach actually helped or made things worse, considering their diet and tools. But one thing's clear, no civilization liked yellow teeth. Even in the Americas, long before toothpaste tubes, people were innovating. The Maya, for instance, decorated their teeth with jade and turquoise, not for function but fashion. Meanwhile, Andean communities used charcoal and salt for a blackened, but bacteria-resistant smile. You lean back and think of all these rituals. None involved minty foam, but they were rooted in logic, culture, and a little bit of magical thinking. Like how some believed chewing fennel drove out bad spirits from the mouth, or that certain powders would make your smile irresistible to gods, or that a toothache meant you had offended a mouse spirit living in your molars. Yes, that's a thing. And what about bad breath? There was a whole olfactory war going on. From cinnamon sticks to orange peels to mouth rinses made with vinegar and honey, people went to great lengths to mask unpleasant odors, especially in societies where proximity was tight and personal space a modern invention. A merchant in ancient Baghdad might carry a perfumed handkerchief for both his nose and yours. Meanwhile, your Egyptian counterpart might munch on frankincense like chewing gum. The taste, pungent, piney, and probably not great with morning coffee. But coffee wouldn't come around for another millennium. You close your eyes, feeling the imagined crunch of ash between your teeth, the slow rub of herbal cloth across your gums, and the deep cultural yearning to feel clean, even if nobody really knew what a cavity was. And yet, despite thousands of years, the goal remains the same, not just health, but dignity. A clean mouth meant you could speak, smile, and sing without shame. Even if, once in a while, it meant putting cow dung or oyster shells in your mouth. You shift gently on your pillow, the images fading like soap bubbles, fizzy, strange, and oddly comforting. Your miswak twig lies beside you, your Roman rinse bottle firmly corked. Tomorrow, your journey continues. But for now, your teeth are clean. Your breath, at least in this dream, is sweet. You're up early, dawn barely peeking over the 7 hills of Rome, as you wrap yourself in layers of heavy fabric. The toga is stiffer than you'd like, and honestly, for something that's supposed to symbolize dignity and order, it feels a bit like trying to wear your bedspread to work. Still, you've got a Senate meeting to attend, and tradition waits for no one. This morning, you're wearing a toga virilis, a plain white woolen wrap that marks you as a Roman male citizen. It's itchy, cumbersome, and draped in a very specific way that took your slave assistant, Publius, nearly 20 minutes to perfect. Tuck here, fold there, sweep over the left shoulder. Make sure the edge hangs just so. Otherwise you risk looking like a disheveled poet, and no one wants that. You step into the street and nod to a neighbor, who gives you a brief glance and subtly raises one eyebrow. You know what he's thinking, your toga's a little off. Maybe too long in the back. Maybe a bit crooked. The toga was more than clothing, it was a billboard. Collar length and drape all communicated something: your age, your social status, and even your mood. The toga praetexta, with its purple stripe, was worn by senators and magistrates. An elegant, stately look that practically screamed, "Don't talk to me unless you have a petition." Meanwhile, generals and emperors wore the toga picta, dyed entirely purple and embroidered with gold. It looked majestic and also a bit ridiculous. Try imagining someone today walking into Parliament dressed like a velvet curtain with gold glitter. Historians still argue whether the toga's complexity was meant to uphold Roman values or simply to discourage the lower classes from faking their way into power. Either way, wearing one properly took training and muscle. There's a real chance you'd break a sweat just adjusting it every time it slipped. For special occasions, togas came with added flair. During funerals, mourners wore togas pulled over their heads in a gesture of grief. Candidates for office wore a specially whitened version, the toga candida, from which we get the word candidate. Yes, political branding has always involved a bit of bleaching. As you walk the forum, your toga makes you part of a flowing crowd of white fabric and quiet competition. One senator tucks his folds tighter. Another lets his drape fall longer in front to show off wealth. It was like high fashion with none of the fun, and a lot of backhatch. And don't think women were left out of the fabric games. Though they generally wore stolas, certain, less respectable, women, namely, prostitutes, were required to wear togas as a mark of shame. Imagine being wrapped in itchy wool not just as a fashion statement, but as a legal identifier. That's not just uncomfortable, it's branding by discomfort. You step onto the rostra, the speaking platform. If you're lucky, your toga won't come undone mid-speech, but it has happened. There are records, sparse but giggle-worthy, of orators tripping over their own hems or gesturing too wildly and flinging a fold into their neighbor's face. On colder days, layering was key. You'd sometimes wear a tunic underneath, maybe even 2. But heaven forbid your tunic hem peek out. Shabby! The toga had to dominate. You start to realize to wear a toga well was an act of commitment. You didn't just put it on. You wore it like an identity. It weighed you down, literally and symbolically. Quirky side note, Roman toga fabric was often repurposed. When worn out, pieces became baby swaddles, dishcloths, even wrapping for statues during rituals. Imagine today's tailored suit becoming a table napkin at a cousin's birthday. The wool itself was coarse by modern standards. Soft cashmere, dream on. This was sheepy, scratchy stuff. And if it rained, it smelled exactly like what you'd expect wet sheep to smell like. Add in the heat of the Roman summer, and you begin to understand why many commoners just opted for simpler tunics, even if it marked them as low status. Still, the toga endured, at least until the empire shifted and styles changed. Later emperors preferred military garb to signal strength, and eventually, even citizens abandoned the toga for lighter, easier-to-wear garments. But for a few shining centuries, that draped fabric ruled the streets, courts, and temples. You pause, seated now on a stone bench, smoothing your toga once more. You remember that when Julius Caesar was assassinated, he pulled his toga over his head to maintain dignity. When Cicero gave his final oration, he adjusted the folds just before speaking. Every pleat, every tuck, it was choreography with meaning. You lean back, half listening to the distant hum of a market hawker and the rustling of other togas moving around you. You've survived a day in Roman society's most symbolic outfit. Itchy shoulders, back sweat, fabric mishaps and all. Your feet ache a little, but you feel, strangely, a sense of pride. You didn't trip. You didn't spill wine on yourself. And no one laughed at your draping. That, in ancient Rome, counted as a win. By midday, you're roasting gently in your toga, already regretting that second layer. Rome's sun is no joke, and the forum feels like a frying pan. But don't worry, you're heading somewhere cooler, the Roman baths. Or, as you might come to call them, the ancient world's most extravagant social club with steam. You duck down a shaded alley, past a fishmonger loudly arguing over the price of yesterday's mackerel, and arrive at one of the city's many public baths. This one, the Baths of Agrippa, tucked near the Pantheon. They're open to all male citizens for a small fee. Women have their own separate hours or entirely different facilities, depending on the location. Even the bathhouse schedule reflects Rome's obsession with order and a touch of gendered inconvenience. You slip off your toga, which is instantly soaked with sweat, lovely, and hand it over to an attendant, probably a young slave who'll guard it in exchange for a coin, and the unspoken promise that you won't complain if it gets stolen. Spoiler, it might. You step inside, and the temperature shifts dramatically. First, the apoditerium, or changing room, noisy, echoing, full of the smells of oil, damp limestone, and gossip. Then into the warm tepidarium, where your skin begins to adjust, your muscles start to relax, and you wonder if this is the closest thing to a Roman spa day. Historians still argue whether the primary purpose of the baths was hygiene or politics, but you quickly see both at play. Men drift through rooms discussing grain shortages, gladiator rankings, or who got exiled this week. A senator scrubs his back while muttering about legislation. A merchant brags about his olive harvest as he has his arm hair plucked. Voluntarily, which is the most Roman thing ever. Next is the caldarium, the hot room, and stepping inside is like walking into a steam-filled oven. You take a wooden sandal step forward, careful, the stone floors can scald bare feet, and sit beside a mosaic of Neptune wrangling dolphins. Roman luxury meets sauna sweat. Here you sweat. A lot. Then comes the strigil, a curved metal scraper used to clean your skin. You or your bath buddy slather yourself in perfumed olive oil and scrape the mixture of oil, dirt, and dead skin into what can only be described as ancient soup. Supposedly cleansing, possibly gross. And if you're wealthy, someone else does it for you. There's also the frigidarium, a cold plunge to finish off the routine. You sink into icy water with a gasp, every nerve on edge, then emerge feeling a bit like you've wrestled a sea god. Which, based on the DA core, was probably the goal. You'll find barbers offering shaves, masseurs pounding backs, and even vendors selling snacks. Bathhouses weren't just for bathing, they were cultural hubs, news centers, sometimes even unofficial courtrooms. Deals were struck, alliances formed, and backs stabbed, figuratively, though occasionally literally if someone held a grudge. One quirky fact: bathwater was constantly filtered by slaves operating furnaces and aqueducts. It wasn't exactly clean by modern standards, but it was high-tech for its time. The underfloor heating system, hypercaust, was an engineering marvel, with hot air circulating under raised floors to keep rooms toasty. The Romans really did invent radiant heat centuries before floor-warming bathroom tiles became trendy. But the real marvel is the sound. Voices bounce off domed ceilings, echoing through steam. You hear laughter, groans of relaxation, philosophical debate, and more than one man boasting too loudly about his cousin's cousin being related to Augustus. Despite all this sophistication, bath etiquette could be surprisingly relaxed. Nudity was common, but so were arguments about modesty. Some senators insisted on bathing in loincloths, while others strutted about like marble statues come to life. You, trying not to slip on a damp tile, just hope to leave with both dignity and all your belongings intact. Of course, not everyone loved the baths. Stoic philosophers occasionally grumbled about the decadence. The satirist Juvenal once mocked men who spent more time oiling themselves than doing anything useful. But for most Romans, the baths were sacred ground, equal parts wellness, networking, and ancient gossip mill. You sit beside a young poet who's reciting verses to a clearly disinterested baker. Across the room, a retired soldier tells exaggerated tales of his time in Britannia. You think you catch a wink from a passing massier, but you're not sure. Steam plays tricks on the eyes. One historian noted that bathhouses could be so noisy and crowded that some people came just to listen. They'd perch on benches with no intention of bathing, purely to absorb the city's heartbeat, like a thermal Twitter feed, if Twitter were full of olive oil and old men arguing over coin quality. As you wrap up your visit, you take a moment in the palestra, the outdoor exercise yard. A few men are tossing discus, others wrestling, and at least one guy pretending to stretch while checking out the crowd. It's like an open-air gym, minus headphones and protein shakes. After a final splash of cold water and a quick rub-down with a towel that feels like sandpaper, you retrieve your toga miraculously unstolen, redrape yourself with as much dignity as possible, and step back into the sunlight. You feel lighter. Not just physically, but socially. You've scrubbed off the city's dust, caught up on the latest rumors, and maybe even impressed someone with your smooth toga rewrap. For a brief moment, you understand why the baths were considered essential, not indulgent. And as you walk back through the streets, the breeze drying your damp hair, you can't help but think, if every gym today offered a hot soak, a poetry recital, and oil scrapes, you might actually go more often. After the bathhouse, you're glowing, literally. Between the olive oil sheen, the sweat still clinging to your temples, and the faint scent of lavender, you look and feel like a newly minted denarius. But relaxation never lasts long in Rome. Your stomach growls, and it's time to navigate the strange, savory, and sometimes questionable world of Roman food. You don't go home to eat. Home is for cold leftovers, maybe bread with olives. If you're wealthy, there's a chance you'll dine later with guests reclining on couches. But for now, you're just a regular citizen. And regular citizens, they eat out. A lot. Street vendors, open-air taverns called popinae, and walk-in food counters known as thermopolia line the roads like the Roman answer to food trucks. You stop at one. Its marble counter embedded with terracotta jars, dolia filled with warm lentils, barley porridge, and something that might be eel stew. The air smells of wine, garlic, and socks. It's comforting in a weird way. You order a panis, a dense wheat loaf baked in communal ovens, and some mortem, a garlicky cheese spread pounded with herbs and vinegar. For protein, there's a grilled sausage that may or may not be mystery meat. You don't ask questions. You just enjoy the crunch of the bread, the sting of the garlic, and the relief of not having to cook. Historians still argue whether thermopolia catered primarily to the working class, or also drew in wealthier passers-by. The truth is, when hunger strikes, status fades. Even senators sneak a fig pastry now and then. As you munch, you overhear nearby diners debating a gladiator match, the newest mosaic scandal, and whether pickled dormice really do taste better stuffed with pine nuts. A drunken man sings a verse of Virgil, badly, while his friend tries to balance a wine jug on his head. You look away before you're roped into a wager. Roman food, contrary to popular myth, isn't always extravagant. The vast majority of people ate a humble diet. Grains, legumes, the occasional fish or fowl. Meat was a luxury. Spices were expensive imports, though garum, the infamous fermented fish sauce, flowed like ketchup on everything. Salty, tangy, possibly alarming in smell, but undeniably addictive. You sip a cup of posca, a sour wine diluted with vinegar and herbs. It was a soldier's drink, but commoners adopted it too. Hydrating, cheap, and hard to spill. It's the ancient version of electrolyte water, if electrolyte water had a punch like salad dressing. Your fingers greasy, your belly content. You wander toward the Macellum, Rome's central market. It's chaos in the best way, loud haggling, colourful stalls, and chickens darting between marble legs. You pass baskets of dates, figs, pine nuts, and jars of imported honey from Hispania. A butcher holds up a lamb's head and winks. You politely decline. Roman kitchens were rarely located inside apartments due to fire risks, and most urban homes didn't even have one. So communal eating was more than culture. It was logistics. You shared food, stories, and jokes, often while standing elbow to elbow with someone you'd never speak to otherwise. One quirky fact: Roman bakers branded loaves with marks or initials before baking. Not for flavor, but to prove who baked it, and avoid theft at the communal oven. If you burned the bread, everyone knew. Like an ancient version of Yelp reviews, but carved into crust. Still licking olive oil from your thumb, you stumble upon a curious sight: a man selling flamingo tongues on skewers. Yes, flamingo. For the ultra-rich, these delicacies were served cold with pepper and vinegar. You, however, make a hard pass and settle for a skewer of seasoned chickpeas instead. There's a rhythm to Roman eating, frugal but flavorful. Even when food was simple, preparation was everything. Porridges could be sweetened with honey or thickened with cheese. Figs were stuffed, mulled wine was spiced, and lentils were simmered with bay leaves and mystery herbs. You see a cluster of children around a sweet cellar. He's hawking dulcia domestica, dates stuffed with nuts, rolled in honey, and dusted with sesame. The kids squeal as they grab them in sticky handfuls. You buy one out of curiosity and are immediately transported to dessert heaven. Somehow both crunchy and syrupy, it leaves your lips shining like polished marble. Historians still debate whether Roman food was genuinely flavorful or just aggressively seasoned to cover up spoilage. You decide it's both. With no refrigerators, you'd probably drown everything in vinegar too. Later, as the sun begins to dip and golden light spills across the stone streets, you walk past an upper-class domus preparing for its cena, the evening meal. Slaves hurry in and out with trays of peacock eggs, roasted boar, and sculpted pastries shaped like fish. You catch a glimpse of guests reclining on couches, nibbling delicately and pretending not to judge each other. You smile. You're not dressed for that world tonight, but you're well fed. Your palate stretched in 10 new directions, and you haven't vomited once, which in Rome is basically a Michelin star review. And just as you turn to leave the Macelum, you spot one final delight, a large clay amphora with a spout and a vendor grinning beside it. It's spiced wine, gently warmed, infused with cloves, cinnamon, and citrus peel. You sip, sigh, and sink against a pillar, letting the noise of the city swirl around you like steam from the caldarium. As night settles in and oil lamps begin to flicker on balconies, you feel deeply Roman, fed, buzzed, and very slightly sticky. And isn't that the dream? You wake early, though your limbs protest. Maybe it was the wine. Maybe it was the stuffed date. Maybe it was the guy who serenaded the street with his rendition of an epic poem until the moon slipped behind the hills. Either way, the city of Rome is already alive. And you don't want to miss the morning buzz at the Forum. You throw on your tunic. It's rumpled but passable. And step into your sandals, still dusty from yesterday's wanderings. The street greets you with a flurry of motion, donkeys clopping, children shouting, a woman chasing a runaway goose, and two elderly men arguing fiercely about Cicero's latest speech, one of them wildly waving a cabbage. You thread your way through the vicus, or neighborhood street, dodging a bucket of grey water being dumped from an upper window. You now walk close to the walls, like any seasoned Roman. The smells of baking bread, wet stone, and horse droppings make a surprisingly harmonious bouquet. At the end of the street rises the Forum Romanum, the heart, gossip mill, and dramatic stage of the Roman world. You step into its embrace, a patchwork of marble columns, echoing courtyards, bustling porticos, and voices bouncing off stone like birds in a bathhouse. The sun hits the bronze roof of the Temple of Saturn, making it gleam like a divine coin. Merchants already hawk their wares nearby: scrolls, figs, cheap jewelry, and questionable amulets. A woman sells small lead curse tablets, claiming they'll ruin your rival's crops. You're tempted, just a little. Despite its grandeur, the Forum isn't just for senators and orators. It's where Rome breathes. Bakers argue with scribes, farmers barter with patricians, and philosophers deliver monologues to pigeons who do not seem convinced. You pass the rostra, the speaker's platform. A barefoot man in a toga is passionately criticizing tax reforms, spitting his piece so hard the front row flinches. His arguments are complex, but his audience is a mix of amused students and people looking for shade. Historians still argue whether the Forum was a place of true public access or more tightly controlled by elites. But standing here, hearing 10 conversations at once, you get the sense that anyone could shout, though only a few were really heard. A magistrate passes, flanked by lictors carrying the fasces, bundles of rods with an axe in the middle, symbols of Roman authority, and a subtle, "don't mess with me" gesture. People step aside with grudging respect. You try to look uninterested and not accidentally suspicious. Next, you cross to the Basilica Julia, where legal disputes are heard. Inside, a man in an impressively wrinkled toga argues over a property line. You don't stay long. Legal Latin makes your temples ache. Nearby, a scribe offers to write a love poem for 2 sesterces. You consider commissioning one for your neighbor's cat, who seems more reliable than most Roman senators. A street performer draws a crowd with a trained monkey that climbs his back to steal grapes and gently returns them to the giggling children. You laugh too, forgetting the stiff Forum rituals for a moment. Even in a marble jungle, Rome finds room for play. Off to one side, a tabularium clerk copies tax records on wax tablets, pausing to swat flies. The smell of ink and beeswax mixes with sweat and sun-warmed stone. Your inner child wants to poke the wax, just to see if it's still soft. You resist. Barely. You pass a group of philosophers holding what appears to be a debate about beans, whether they are worthy of consumption or corrupt the soul. You're too hungry to engage and slip by, muttering, "Beans are beans, Marcus." And then, glory of glories, you find a shaded bench by the temple of Castor and Pollux and sit. Your calves sigh in gratitude. The temple's gleaming steps feel cool to the touch, and you lean back, eyes half closed, letting Latin murmurings, bird calls, and the clack of sandals lull you into near meditation. A quick quirky fact: the Forum used to flood every winter before proper drainage, and Romans once held mock naval battles in the low spots. Picture toga-wearing citizens punting tiny boats where senators now debate grain prices. That's Rome, one moment grandeur, the next glorified water park. A man selling libum, sweet sacrificial cakes, offers you one dusted with cheese and honey. You break it in half, steam curling from the soft middle. Sweet, warm, and vaguely divine. You suspect the gods ate better than this, but not by much. As you chew, you listen in on a gossip circle discussing a noblewoman who allegedly wore purple to a dinner party. Scandalous. Only the emperor can wear that shade, but fashion rebels are eternal, it seems. Historians still debate whether the average Roman had genuine access to political life, or was simply an onlooker. But here, in the thrumming mosaic of the Forum, politics and daily life swirl into one chaotic stew. Everyone's a participant, even if only by eavesdropping. The morning passes in a whirl of overheard arguments, accidental elbow jabs, breadcrumbs, lost scrolls, and philosophical musings you can't quite translate. You see ambition, superstition, boredom, and theatrical drama play out in every direction. And yet it all works. Somehow. By midday, the heat turns the marble into a frying pan. You retreat, dabbing your forehead, ready to slip back into the shade of your insula. As you leave, the Forum is still alive, more so than ever. Romans don't clock out, they just shift to louder topics. You glance back one last time. The sun catches the tips of the columns like torches, voices rise in a familiar rhythm, and you realize that in ancient Rome, even doing nothing at the Forum counts as something. You're wilting slightly by the time you reach your insula. The multi-story apartment building that is somehow still upright despite creaking like a chorus of old wooden ships. It's a miracle of Roman engineering, or perhaps just Roman indifference to building codes. Still, it's home, and you're overdue for a breather. The insulae, Rome's high-rise housing, are where most people live. Forget marble villas and private atriums. That's for senators and soap opera villains. Your place is up 3 flights of questionable stairs, where you've learned to hold your breath past the fishmonger's unit on the 2nd floor. If you survive that, you deserve lunch. You duck into the stairwell, dodging a neighbor's laundry flapping like flags of surrender. Somewhere above, a baby is crying, a cat is yowling, and 2 old women are deep in discussion about the reliability of fortune tellers. You nod politely and get roped into a 5-minute debate on whether dreams about goats mean money or betrayal. You finally reach your door, wooden, slightly warped, with a latch that works only if you talk sweetly to it. Inside, it's one room, low ceiling, cracked plaster, and a shelf of clay oil lamps. A curtain divides your sleeping corner from the rest of the space, giving the illusion of privacy. You've even got a chipped mosaic of Bacchus on the wall. Classy. From your small window, you can just see the Forum rooftops shimmering. You open the shutters, letting in a breeze, and instantly regret it. The breeze brings with it the city's full bouquet roasted meat, sweat, damp straw incense, sewage and bread. Rome's perfume. Still, you need to eat. You dig into a woven basket. Figs, olives, half a loaf of bread that could double as a building brick, and a wedge of cheese probably older than the Republic. You pop a fig into your mouth. Its sticky sweetness a welcome surprise. For dessert, honeyed almonds, if you can pry them from the waxy bundle tied with twine. As you nibble, you think about how Roman insulae were feats of practical madness. Historians still argue whether some of these buildings reached up to 8 stories, or if that was an exaggeration meant to showcase Rome's vertical ambition. Regardless, fires were a constant danger, and upper floors were cheaper, because, well, gravity plus flames equals poor resale value. You lie back on your cot, woven rope, scratchy blanket, and a pillow made of cloth stuffed with goose feathers and unanswered dreams. The ceiling has a spider. You name him Pliny. Despite the cramped space, there's a rhythm here. Outside, the apartment's internal courtyard echoes with daily life. Someone is singing badly. Another neighbor grumbles about her missing laundry, possibly stolen by the man downstairs who fashions togas out of lost garments, and a teenage boy practices reciting Virgil. You shout the wrong line at him for fun. He curses, you both laugh. A knock at your door. It's your downstairs neighbor offering a bit of stew. You trade her some olives. This is how it works: barter, borrow, and hope they forget who owns that clay jug you've been using for 2 weeks. You step back outside after lunch, weaving through kids playing knucklebones in the alley and a rat who looks far too confident. A public fountain gurgles nearby, one of Rome's many, fed by the aqueducts that carry water from miles away. You splash your face, refreshing, if slightly suspect. A man beside you fills a jar, muttering about water spirits. You nod respectfully. The insula across from yours has a small shrine tucked into its wall, probably to Lares, the household gods. Fresh flowers, burnt incense, and a small ceramic piglet offering sit at its base. You add a fig and whisper, "Don't let the stairs collapse." You glance up and catch sight of a woman leaning out of her 3rd-story window, shaking a rug. Dust plumes like smoke. You blink it away and hear her shout something vaguely friendly. Or maybe an insult. Hard to tell with Romans. As you wander back inside, you think about how these apartment blocks, though ramshackle and chaotic, are what held Rome together. Not the marble columns or the senatorial decrees, but daily life. The gossip, the food sharing, the borrowed jugs, and the whispered prayers at doorframe shrines. You stretch, yawn, and consider a nap. The floor creaks like it's consulting a lawyer, but your cot holds. You let your eyes close briefly, lulled by the buzz of the building, the soft scrape of broom bristles, and the comforting presence of Pliny, your ceiling spider. Some historians still debate whether living in an insula was a mark of poverty or simply of pragmatism. You'd argue it's a bit of both, sure. Your walls are thin enough to hear your neighbor chew, but there's always someone to lend an onion or a joke. As you drift into that lazy post-lunch haze, a lute begins to strum faintly from somewhere in the building. It's badly tuned, but earnest, and somehow that's enough. You think, not for the first time, that Rome is like this insula, rickety, too loud, occasionally stinky, and absolutely full of life. The sun tilts ever westward as you stir from your nap, stretching until your joints sound like the creak of the insula itself. Rome, ever restless, is sliding into afternoon, and that means it's time for one of the city's true rituals, not blood sport, not politics, not even scandalous poetry. No, it's bath time. You gather your things, a towel's coarse linened, a small flask of olive oils, because soap hasn't been invented, but slipping into greased selfhood hast, and a strigil, a curved, blunt blade for scraping off oil, sweat, and shame. No Roman bath is complete without it. The baths aren't just about hygiene. They're an institution, a daily reset button. You trudge toward the Thermae of Titus, cutting through a square where a puppet show draws a modest crowd. A small boy narrates the tale of Hercules, wildly inaccurate and completely delightful. You pause, chuckle, and move on. The Thermae loom ahead like temples to the gods of hot water. Grand pillars, frescoed walls, and a lingering smell of damp sandals. You pay your modest entry fee and pass through the apoditerium, the changing room, where men from every walk of Roman life are undressing, gossiping, and pretending not to look at each other's sandals. You find a niche, undress, and stash your belongings. No lockers here, just shelves and trust, occasionally reinforced by slaves who watch over the goods like hawks with unions. Then begins the circuit. First stop the tepidarium, a warm room designed to open your pores and your social boundaries. The air is thick, heavy with a humid fog that curls around every limb. You sit on a stone bench beside a man humming tunelessly, and a senator who is definitely pretending he doesn't recognize you from the bakery incident. You nod politely. He nods back. Rome is built on silent agreements like this. Next, you ease into the caldarium, the hot room. It's like being swallowed by a volcano with body odor. Your skin prickles. Your lungs rebel. But oh, the sweat. You ladle hot water over yourself, pour a bit of olive oil on your arms, and use the strigil to scrape it all away. Off comes the dust of the forum, the scent of goat, and the existential grime of daily survival. A man beside you gives a long monologue about the medicinal benefits of boiled lettuce. You nod wisely, though historians still argue whether Romans genuinely believed half the things they repeated in baths, or whether it was just tradition to lie dramatically while sweating. You hear laughter echo from the frigidarium, the cold plunge pool. Time to test your courage. You shuffle from the inferno to the icy chamber and hesitate at the edge. The water looks harmless enough, but you know its true nature. You brace yourself, utter a quiet, "May Neptune guide me," and jump. The cold hits like betrayal. Every inch of you tightens. You make a sound that might legally be defined as a yelp. But then bliss. The heat evaporates, the ache in your shoulders retreats, and your thoughts go momentarily blank. You float for a moment, staring at the ceiling where painted sea creatures cavort, octopuses with suspiciously smug smiles, and dolphins the size of oxen. Decorative fantasy, sure, but somewhere deep inside, you start to believe one of them just winked at you. Afterward, you dry off in the open-air courtyard, lounging on a bench beside a group playing dice. Someone offers you a date, the fruit, though they wink as they say it. You accept, chewy sweet, vaguely sandy, just like the ones your grandmother used to steal from the temple offerings. A flute player walks through the crowd, offering music for coins. You toss him one, and he rewards you with a tune that drifts like steam, delicate, slightly off-key, perfect. Baths, you realize, are Rome's great equalizer. Here, the baker sweats beside the scholar, the slave beside the senator. There's no status when you're all wearing the same olive oil, or lack thereof. And yet, it's not all camaraderie and citrus-scented enlightenment. Baths have their dark corners too. Some historians note the occasional outbreak of disease traced to poorly maintained pools. Others argue whether certain bathhouses doubled as sites for whispered deals or backdoor politics, both literal and figurative. But here now, wrapped in the afterglow of heat and conversation, you feel restored. As you dress again, your linen tunic clings slightly, and your hair flops in damp rebellion. You pass a mirror and nearly convince yourself you look like a fresher, more confident version of you. A bath can do that. Back out on the street, the sun hangs low, casting long, golden shadows across the cobbles. Rome smells better now, or perhaps you do. You walk lighter, more fluid, as if the city has been scrubbed a bit too. Passing a food stall, you buy a fried cheese pastry wrapped in fig leaf. The vendor nods at your damp curls. Just come from the caldarium. You nod, mouth full of pastry. He sighs dreamily. That's the life. And it is. For all its grime, chaos, and goat-based hygiene routines, Rome knows how to clean up after itself, or at least pretend to. You head home as twilight spills through alleyways, olive trees rustling above rooftops, and the last of the bathhouse steam still clinging faintly to your skin. You arrive home just as the sky begins its shift from peach to plum. The air cools at least a little, and you pass through your door with that post-bath smugness unique to a Roman who smells vaguely of lavender oil and sinned sandal leather. Time to think about dinner. If you're lucky, your cook, assuming you have one, is already fussing with olives, onions, and a questionable piece of goat meat. If not, you're the cook, and it's going to be one of those toast with a side of shame nights. Tonight, however, you are in luck. The kitchen hearth glows gently, and a small clay pot emits the promising burble of pulse, a thick barley porridge, the Roman equivalent of a sad but filling casserole. You dip a finger in, blow on it theatrically, and taste. Slightly bland, but then again, so is half of Roman cuisine. You settle into your meal at a low wooden table. No chairs. Romans eat reclining. Because slouching is historically dignified. You flop onto your couch like a well-fed cat and let the evening unfold. Tonight's meal includes moratum, a garlic and cheese spread so potent it could be used to negotiate peace treaties, or end them. There's a bowl of boiled lentils, a slab of stale bread softened with vinegar, and a single fig for dessert. Your teeth protest slightly at the density, but your stomach accepts it like a stoic philosopher. Across the courtyard, someone is loudly butchering a love song on the lyre. You give it a polite moment, then close your shutters, gently. Evenings in Rome are never truly quiet. Somewhere a dog barks. Somewhere a slave drops a jug and gets scolded. Somewhere a couple is arguing about whose turn it is to refill the oil lamp. You pour a small cup of watered wine. Romans never drink it straight, unless they're trying to get banned from dinner parties. Yours is a modest blend, 1 part wine, 4 parts water, 1 part optimism. It tastes slightly of raisins and smoke. While you eat, your neighbor leans out of her window and greets you. She's 80 if she's a day, and somehow still has better posture than you. She asks if your bath was pleasant. You reply yes, and she nods wisely, as if that alone will ensure your success in life. Then she vanishes into the gloom with a cackle. You scrape the last of the mortem from your plate and start to tidy up. Plates clink softly, dogs howl in the distance, and a breeze stirs the curtain. Somewhere above, a household god, your Lararium figurine, watches over you from its shelf. You give it a respectful nod. You didn't die in the caldarium, so clearly it's earning its keep. After dinner, you light a tiny oil lamp and place it near your cushion. It sputters gently, casting long shadows on the wall. You pull out a wax tablet and stylus, jotting down notes from your day. Polls good. Senator still smug. Bath excellent. Puppet show disturbing. The act of writing slows your breath. The wax cools beneath your stylus. The lamp flickers. You sit back, feeling the weight of the day melt into the worn linen of your tunic. This is what passes for luxury. A full belly, clean limbs, and a quiet moment under a Roman moon. Still, there are errands. You promise to pick up a new cloak from the cloth merchant. Yours smells faintly of pigeon and betrayal. You need to visit the taberna tomorrow to replenish your oil supply. And your sandals. Let's not even talk about the sandal situation. You stretch, yawn, and look up at the stars just beginning to prick the sky. There are fewer of them now, thanks to the smog of thousands of hearths, and the eternal flame of Vesta doing her best impression of a smoke signal. Still, the brightest ones wink through. Jupiter, Mars, perhaps? Tiny gods watching your tiny life. Historians still argue whether Romans truly felt spiritual connection during these evening rituals, or if it was just social performance. A "look how pious I am" kind of deal. Either way, you light a stick of incense and offer a crumb of bread at the household altar, just in case. The smoke curls upward, lazily dancing toward the cracked ceiling beams. You take one last look at your modest home. The cot is lumpy. The floor is cold. The air still smells faintly of the public latrine 3 streets over. But it's yours, for now. Before sleep, you fiddle briefly with a tessera hospitalis, a token given long ago by a family friend from Ostia. It splits neatly into 2 halves. A symbol of ancient hospitality, but also a handy metaphor for your life, constantly pieced together, rarely matching perfectly, always vaguely sticky from figs. You stash it beneath your pillow. If dreams are visitors, let them be kind tonight. You blow out the lamp. Darkness wraps around you like an old toga. Sleep doesn't come fast in Rome. It saunters like a senator arriving late to his own speech. But it comes, eventually. And when it does, it carries the scent of oil baths, barley stew, and the faintest whisper of that smug octopus you saw painted on the bathhouse wall. Dawn breaks slowly over the city of Carthage, a jewel of the ancient Mediterranean that once rivaled Rome itself. You wake to the sound of distant waves lapping against the harbour and the murmur of merchants setting up their stalls. Unlike Rome's bustling noise, Carthage carries a soft, salty breath of the sea, mingled with the spice scents from far-off lands. Your day begins not with a bath, but a simple ritual, the making of garum, the famed fermented fish sauce beloved by many Mediterranean cultures. You watch the workers stirring vats of sun-cooked fish guts, their faces streaked with salty sweat and a knowing grin. This pungent brew is a luxury that elevates even the humblest meal. The making of garum is an acquired taste and an acquired smell, one historians still debate about. Was it truly as foul as tales say, or did the ancient world just have a stronger nose? You lean in and sniff cautiously. Yes, it's pungent, yes. It smells like the sea's forgotten sock, but somehow also like success in a bottle. As you stroll through the market, you spot the vibrant colours of Phoenician glassware sparkling in the morning light, products of Carthage's renowned artisanship. They trade tirelessly, their goods travelling the famous trade routes from Spain to the Levant. You feel the weight of history in your hand as you examine a delicate cup, the kind once said to be used in rituals honouring Baal Hammon. The locals move with a calm dignity, their faces sun-kissed and their words melodic. Children chase each other near a fountain, splashing water that glitters like liquid silver. You pause and taste the city's famed semolina bread, crusty on the outside but surprisingly tender inside. It's humble but satisfying, fuel for another day in a city built on resilience. Later, you find yourself in a quiet courtyard where a Carthaginian scholar teaches his pupils the art of reading stars, blending Greek astronomy with indigenous lore. The lesson is soft-spoken, a lullaby of constellations and myths, and you imagine the vast skies beyond, where Venus gleams like a nocturnal guardian. Amid these peaceful moments, you overhear a conversation about Hannibal Barca's legendary crossing of the Alps, a story both grand and grueling. Historians continue to debate whether elephants truly marched over those snowy peaks, or if the tale grew in the telling. Either way, it captures your imagination. a reminder that history's greatest journeys often start with a stubborn step forward. As the sun dips low, you sip on a cup of bitter carob, a common Carthaginian drink that's earthy and soothing. You think about the city's fall centuries ago and its echo through time. How the ruins beneath your feet whisper stories of empire and endurance. The air cools, the market quiets, and you settle down beneath a fig tree, the sweet scent wrapping around you like a gentle blanket. Tomorrow will bring more stories, more smells, more moments where history hums softly beneath the surface, and you are content to listen. The sun sets over the sprawling plains of the Mali Empire, where you find yourself surrounded by endless golden grass and the steady rhythm of drums echoing in the distance. You are in Timbuktu, a city known less for its desert heat and more for its shimmering libraries and bustling markets that once drew scholars from across Africa and beyond. Your day begins at the market, where traders from distant lands haggle over salt, gold dust, and exotic spices. The air is thick with the scent of roasted grains and freshly ground millet. You taste a small bite of two, a coarse porridge staple, humble but filling, a reminder that in this land, simplicity often carries deep satisfaction. Nearby, you overhear a storyteller weaving tales of Sundiata Akita, the empire's founder, a hero whose journey is part legend, part history, and still debated by scholars today. Did he really defeat his enemies with magic? Or was it sheer cunning and perseverance? You decide the truth probably lies somewhere in between. As midday heat presses down, you seek refuge in a mud brick library, where ancient manuscripts rest on wooden shelves and scholars pore over texts by candlelight. The wisdom held here seems almost palpable, a silent testament to the empire's dedication to knowledge and learning. Later, you wander past craftsmen shaping intricate jewelry and textiles, marveling at the vibrant colors and geometric patterns. The artisans move with practiced grace, their hands telling stories as vivid as the cloth they dye. As evening falls, you join a gathering under the open sky, where elders share songs accompanied by the gentle strumming of a kora, its notes floating like whispers on the warm breeze. The stories are soothing, a lullaby of history and hope, carrying you toward the night. Finally, you settle on a woven mat, the stars above blazing brighter than any city light. The gentle night hums around you, a soft chorus of insects and distant voices. You feel the weight of centuries resting easy on your shoulders. Sleep is coming now, slow and steady, as timeless as the stories you've heard today. You wake to the soft mist rolling over the fjords of Viking-age Scandinavia, where the salty tang of the sea mingles with pine and moss. Today, you're not the fierce warrior you might expect, but a humble trader navigating a world of longships and wooden halls, where every deal could mean survival or ruin. Your morning starts with a cup of skaya, a thick, tangy yogurt that's more satisfying than it sounds, eaten with a handful of berries gathered from the nearby forest. As you chew, you listen to the crackle of the hearth fire, feeling its warmth seep into your bones. Outside, the village buzzes with activity. Blacksmiths hammer glowing iron, and women weave wool into thick cloaks. The air carries stories of gods and heroes, whispered from one generation to the next. You overhear a discussion about the elusive berserkers, warriors said to enter battle in a trance-like fury. Historians still argue whether these were real frenzies or metaphorical exaggerations, but the mystery only adds to the charm. By midday, you're on a longship, the wooden vessel slicing through cold waters. The sea spray chills your face, but you welcome it. Fresh air is a precious commodity in these lands. Your crew hums old songs, the rhythm matching the steady pull of oars. It's peaceful and wild all at once. At a coastal trading post, you exchange furs for silks, marveling at the intricate patterns on the imported fabric. Trade routes stretch far, and goods like amber, spices, and even wine pass through hands just like yours. Later, you return to the village and settle beside the fire, listening to the Skald recite epic poems. The flickering flames cast dancing shadows on carved wooden walls, and you feel wrapped in a timeless world where myth and reality blur gently. As darkness falls, you wrap yourself in a thick wool cloak, the scent of pine smoke comforting and familiar. You imagine the ancient trees standing sentinel outside, guarding secrets you'll never fully know. Sleep beckons softly, a deep, rhythmic pulse, like the steady beat of a drum on a quiet night. The early morning fog clings to the lush jungles of the ancient Maya civilization, where the scent of damp earth and blooming orchids wraps around you like a gentle, green hug. You find yourself in the heart of a sprawling city, with towering stone pyramids and plazas humming quietly with the soft chatter of daily life. You start your day with a simple breakfast of tamales wrapped in banana leaves, the steam rising slowly as you unwrap the warm, masa-filled parcels. It's a comforting meal that connects you to countless generations who savored the same flavors. Walking through the shaded avenues, you notice the intricate carvings on temple walls depicting gods, animals, and rulers in elaborate headdresses. The Maya were masters of astronomy, and you overhear a group debating the meaning of the enigmatic long-count calendar. Scholars still argue whether its cycle was truly a prophecy or simply a sophisticated method of tracking time. At the marketplace, vendors offer cacao beans, used as currency and transformed into bitter chocolate drinks reserved for nobility. You sip a cup and savor its earthy bitterness, a stark contrast to the sweetness you're used to. Later, you glimpse artisans painting vivid murals with natural pigments, their hands stained with reds and blues from cochineal and indigo. The colors seem almost to hum with life under the dappled sunlight filtering through the trees. As the afternoon heat fades, you join a peaceful ritual in the plaza, where dancers move slowly to the beat of drums and rattles, their steps a reverent echo of seasons past. The ceremony feels less like performance and more like a timeless prayer whispered on the wind. Night falls softly, and you lie on woven mats under a canopy of stars so bright it feels like the gods themselves are watching. The jungle's nighttime symphony, a chorus of crickets, frogs, and distant howls, rocks you towards sleep. Here, surrounded by whispers of an ancient world, you feel a calm connection to the earth beneath you and the stories held in stone. The dawn light filters softly through the thatched roofs of a traditional Edo period Japanese village. The air carries a faint scent of cherry blossoms and the distant sound of a bamboo flute playing a slow, wistful tune. You rise quietly, your feet touching the cool wooden floorboards of a humble home filled with tatami mats and sliding paper doors. Your morning begins with a ritual cup of matcha tea, whisked to a frothy perfection. The bitterness and earthiness of the tea awaken your senses gently, a perfect companion to the stillness of dawn. Outside, the garden's moss and stone lanterns bask in soft light, a reminder of the Japanese aesthetic of wabi-sabi, finding beauty in imperfection and transience. You join the villagers as they prepare for the day's work, weaving silk threads with patient hands, and tending to rice paddies that stretch out like emerald mirrors. The rhythm of the day moves slowly, like a delicate poem unfolding. You overhear a conversation about the ukiyo, the floating world, of entertainment districts, a place both fascinating and discreetly criticized. Historians still debate how much influence these pleasure quarters had on Edo culture and how openly they were accepted by society. Later, a local artisan shows you the delicate process of kintsugi, repairing broken pottery with gold lacquer. The philosophy behind it, that breakage and repair are part of an object's history, feels like a gentle lesson for life itself. As evening descends, paper lanterns light the streets with a warm glow. You walk slowly past quiet tea houses and the occasional flutter of a kimono sleeve, absorbing the peaceful, almost dreamlike atmosphere. Before night deepens, you sit quietly by a koi pond, watching the fish glide through water rippling like silk. The world feels soft and slow here, a lullaby for the senses, drawing you gently toward rest. Sleep arrives like a tender sigh, wrapped in the calm embrace of a centuries-old culture that values quiet beauty. You awaken to the soft buzz of cicadas in the air, surrounded by the vast savannas of ancient Great Zimbabwe. The sun filters through baobab trees, casting long shadows on the impressive stone ruins that whisper tales of a forgotten kingdom. The air smells faintly of dry earth and ripe marula fruit, a scent both grounding and sweet. Your morning begins with a meal of sorghum porridge, thick and warm, eaten slowly while you watch the activity around the great stone walls. The architecture here is unlike anything else you've seen, massive, mortarless stone constructions that stand as silent sentinels of ingenuity and endurance. You wander through the marketplace where traders exchange gold, dust and ivory, the wealth of this inland empire. The voices around you blend into a gentle hum, a calm soundtrack to daily life. You hear elders discuss the legendary trade routes that linked Great Zimbabwe to distant lands like China and India. Their stories still debated by historians over the precise extent of these ancient connections. Nearby, craftsmen shape pottery and carve intricate wooden sculptures, each piece telling a story of culture and faith. You handle a small figurine and marvel at its delicate features, a peaceful expression frozen in time. As the afternoon sun softens, you stroll past cattle enclosures, where the hum of contented animals mixes with the laughter of children. Livestock is central here, not just for food, but as a symbol of wealth and community. Later, you rest beneath the spreading branches of a marula tree, its leaves whispering in the gentle breeze. You taste a drop of fermented marula juice, tangy and faintly bubbly, a natural reminder that life here balances simplicity and celebration. Night descends slowly, and the stars blaze above with an ancient, steady glow. The ruins stand quiet and strong, a lullaby of stone and earth, cradling your dreams in their ageless arms. A soft chill settles over the rolling hills of the Scottish Highlands as dawn breaks, with a pale pink light spreading across the hither-covered moors. The scent of peat smoke drifts gently through the crisp air, mingling with the faint aroma of dew-soaked grass. You pull a woolen cloak tighter around your shoulders, ready to walk the ancient paths that wind through this rugged landscape. Your day begins with a hearty breakfast of oatcakes and fresh goat cheese, a simple yet satisfying start that prepares you for a life paced by the seasons and stories passed down in song and legend. The village around you stirs slowly, smoke curls from chimneys, and the distant bleating of sheep creates a soothing soundtrack. As you explore, you come across a small stone circle, weathered and moss-covered, standing as a quiet mystery against the skyline. You imagine the rituals that might have taken place here, wondering if these stones were markers of time or gateways to something beyond. Historians still argue whether these ancient monuments were primarily ceremonial or astronomical. Later, you meet a storyteller by the hearth who shares tales of clan chiefs and fearless warriors, but also of the softer moments, the hospitality, the feasts, the music that bound communities together in cold winters. The gentle humor in these stories makes you smile, a reminder that even the toughest times had their lightness. As twilight descends, you listen to the haunting sound of bagpipes drifting through the valley, the notes weaving with the whispering wind. The day winds down slowly, a calm river of moments flowing into night. You settle in by the fire, the warmth drawing your thoughts inward. Outside, the stars blanket the sky in a serene glow, and the wild landscape hums quietly, a lullaby for your weary spirit. Sleep comes gently, like a soft highland breeze carrying you toward peaceful dreams.